Hi, I'm Doug Black at ISC in Hamburg, and with me now is Addison Snell. He's CEO of Intersect360 Research, HPC and AI industry analyst firm. So, Addison, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Doug. Glad to be here. I love ISC.
Great. And you just came out with a new market update. Maybe tell us a little bit about some of the highlights of your latest studies.
Yeah, well, I mean, the biggest headline out of it is that we're returning to a period of steady post-pandemic growth. And, I think there's been a lot of talk around slowness in tech, but that's really the hyperscale companies, the quote unquote big tech that we're enjoying so much above the line growth during the pandemic. Certainly that has slowed down. We said it would slow down as we got to a more normalized economy. And then your more traditional HPC markets, they've really been pretty stable now going last year into this year, and we see a stable growth rate going forward. Now, the AI portion of that is certainly one of the higher growth areas. There's a lot of enthusiasm right now around different types of AI and machine learning, where they're part of HPC, where they're not part of HPC. Some is on-prem, there's a lot in the cloud. So there are a lot of interesting industry dynamics under that, but just getting back to a healthy, stable market after the last couple of years, that's the big news.
Yeah, and now I know with this last study you came forward with what was the phrase? The unified data center theory?
Grand unification,
Grand.
we called it, of data center spending. Yeah, I
So
appreciate it.
what does that mean, and what are the implications in particular for HPC-AI?
Yeah, well, what we did, and we actually did this last year for the first time and then carried it forward into this year, is we wanted to do a complete overview of all data center spending worldwide. Now, we're not general enterprise analysts. There are larger analyst companies that do that, and we're really HPC AI hyperscale people. But what we found is that hyperscale has been growing to the extent that it has so much influence over the rest of the market that unless we said, here's all of data center spending worldwide, and then how much is hyperscale? Now, of the other part that's on-prem, how much is general enterprise? What's HPC and AI? And visually depicted, it was hard to really get across the influence where hyperscale spending is now half of all data center spending worldwide, and it's really concentrated into the top 10. And if you saw Dan Reed's keynote from ISC this year, it was the first time I've seen a keynote presentation that really brought in those same dynamics. In fact, he quoted some of our statistics in his keynote to talk about that heavy influence of hyperscale, which is really the genesis of a lot of the AI that we've seen. It really had its birth in some of these hyperscale areas for their own purposes, and that has just tremendous influence across HPC.
Now, there's been such a craze around generative AI, large language models, ChatGPT. Uh, Tell us, your views on how HPC and AI are kind of feeding off of each other. I think of them as two planets that are in the same orbit and kind of feeding each other.
Yeah, they absolutely are. Because now, if you break up who's spending money on AI infrastructure, again, the biggest pocket is the hyperscale companies. But then when you look at what's on premises in a data center, most of that overlaps with HPC infrastructure, because the reason they're on-prem is they're leveraging infrastructure that they already had for other purposes. There's a small pocket of what you could call pure AI spending that's independent of HPC. Actually, there's a big amount of spending, but a small part of that is on-prem. It has a very heavy cloud focus. If I didn't already have an HPC infrastructure, then I went to cloud. But where we see HPC and AI overlapping, there's a lot of areas where AI is complementing HPC, mostly right now in pre and post-process, where you can do either target reduction or maybe post-process image visualization. But we're starting to lean now more toward into some of the more integrative processes like computational steering. And we had a whole study on that recently that we've been delivering to our clients.
Okay, and just looking at your latest market update from last week, were there any sort of surprises to you in the findings that you all reached?
Well, yeah, I'll give you two answers, one from the survey and one from the market update. On the market update, we've been expecting cloud to stay in the double-digit growth, although it's been coming down post-pandemic. This should be the last year of really big double-digit growth out of, it's been 8 straight years of double-digit growth, but it actually wasn't the highest proportion overall. There was a sudden spike in services spending in all of the different services categories across the board. So whether it's programming services that could be tied to AI, or training services, co-location services, or cloud-like environments. There are all kinds of different category consultation services, cloud enablement services. All of these were up across the board, and we were able to validate that on the supply side also. So it was a very good year for that services category that maybe doesn't always get a lot of the attention it deserves. And then in the AI survey side, which I mentioned, maybe the survey response that I found most surprising, we looked at the extent to which models are being retrained and how often, on a spectrum from never it's trained and it's done up to continuous retraining of models. And in sort of every category, what I was finding is a lot more retraining than I was expecting. There's a higher proportion of continuous or frequent retraining of these models. Now that does correlate with only about 1 in 5 of respondents had their AI all the way into production. So some of that could be a pre-production of trying to get the models right. But there were a lot of interesting findings in there for our clients.
Okay, so we've been with Addison Snell, Intersect360 here at ISC. Addison, thanks so much.
Hey, thanks, Doug. Have a great show.